In the world of the Mafia, only those with a relentless appetite for violence or a shrewd cunning rise to the pinnacle. Yet, nothing in the underworld is as perilous as a mobster who embodies both traits. Vito Genovese, driven by an unparalleled ambition, sought to ascend to the prestigious position of capo di tutti capi, the boss of all bosses. This relentless pursuit placed him at the helm of a crime syndicate destined to carry his name, placing him at the epicenter of events that would profoundly shape the American criminal landscape. The tale of Vito Genovese begins when he arrives in New York from Naples as a mere 15-year-old. He was just one among the throngs of Italian immigrants flooding the city's shores at the turn of the century. Raised in the squalor of New York's slums, Genovese was no stranger to the harsh realities of life. He found his early footing amidst the terrifying street gangs where violence reigned supreme, an environment that would indelibly shape his character. A product of the city's darkest corners, Genovese thrived amidst conflict and chaos. Violence was his language and the gun his constant companion. Police records stand as a testament to his ruthless nature. Over a span of 10 years, charges of unspeakable brutality marked his name. From shooting a man in Queens to the brutal slaying of another in Brooklyn, his rap sheet spoke volumes. The streets whispered tales of Genovese's exploits, of a loaded revolver discreetly nestled into his belt on the Lower East Side, and the swift, deadly retribution he unleashed upon rival hoodlums. Vito Genovese's story is a saga painted in blood, a narrative of unrelenting ambition and unwavering brutality that etched his name into the annals of organized crime history. Peter Jennifer provides a vivid illustration of Vito Genovese's ruthlessness through a chilling example. Genovese, driven by a forbidden love for a woman named Anna, who was already married, orchestrated a gruesome act. He and his henchmen callously threw Anna's husband off a rooftop, clearing the path for Genovese to marry her. This act of violence was merely a ritual to him, devoid of any moral compass or conscience. Genovese's insatiable appetite for bloodshed did not go unnoticed. In the midst of the 1920s, he emerged as a formidable hitman, working under the tutelage of one of the most notorious mafia bosses, Charles "Lucky" Luciano. Under Luciano's patronage, Genovese ascended through intimidation and fear. Luciano, despite his cultivated appearance, relied on Genovese as his enforcer. The mafia kingpin needed individuals capable of executing his directives, and Genovese was one of the primary go-to figures. By 1931, Genovese had secured his place as Luciano's right-hand man and underboss. He was entrusted with pivotal tasks, including being one of the key hitmen dispatched by Luciano to eliminate rival boss Giuseppe Masseria. His trail of violence and ruthlessness earned him a notorious moniker, Don Vito, or the Great Vito. Genovese's reputation as a ruthless figurehead was solidified by his willingness to execute merciless orders without a hint of hesitation. In 1936, fate presented Genovese with an unprecedented opportunity. Following mafia boss Luciano's conviction on prostitution charges, resulting in a 50-year prison sentence, the vacancy at the top beckoned Genovese. Following Lucky Luciano's conviction and imprisonment, Vito Genovese envisioned himself as the rightful successor to the throne of the Luciano family. However, his aspirations hit a snag as authorities began pursuing him for his involvement in a murder dating back to the early 1930s. Despite having previously evaded legal consequences, this time an informant stepped forward, accusing Genovese of orchestrating the fatal hit. The victim, a member of Genovese's gang, had demanded a larger portion of the spoils from a rigged card game, ultimately meeting a gruesome fate at Genovese's alleged command. As Genovese stood on the cusp of seizing control of the Luciano family, the murder charge forced him into a hasty escape to Italy to evade both arrest and the electric chair. With Genovese's sudden departure, Luciano, orchestrating events from his prison cell, signaled for Frank Costello to assume a significant role in the syndicate. Frank Costello, like Genovese, hailed from Italy, arriving in East Harlem at the age of 4 with his parents. His father's modest grocery store upbringing, which Costello abhorred for its acceptance of a life of poverty, steered him toward the streets. Rejecting his father's path, Costello embraced the ruthless underbelly of New York, joining one of the city's notorious and violent gangs. In 1915, Frank Costello faced a turning point when he was arrested and sentenced to a year in jail for carrying a firearm. This experience marked a pivotal shift in his demeanor, setting him apart from the likes of Genovese. Upon his release, Costello made a conscious decision to employ his intellect rather than resorting to brute force to ascend in the criminal world. Unlike the conventional mobsters he associated with, Costello comprehended the detrimental impact of violent acts on business dealings. He distanced himself from the typical muscle-centric approach, earning a reputation as a gentleman gangster who eschewed thuggery. Additionally, Costello recognized the potential in slot machines, embracing this illicit venture. By the 1930s, he gained notoriety as the king of the slots. His underground network of one-armed bandit machines raked in a staggering $500,000 daily, catapulting him into a league of unprecedented wealth. Costello's strategic focus on lucrative endeavors positioned him as a significant earner in the underworld, distinct from those reliant on violent crimes or hits to establish their dominance. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Vito Genovese navigated life in Italy, attempting to carve out a path for himself after fleeing the United States to evade the murder charges looming over him. Rumors circulated that he carried a fortune of $750,000 in his escape, indicative of his intent to rebuild and possibly reclaim his stake in the criminal hierarchy. With Genovese absent from the American underworld, Frank Costello emerged as a formidable force. As the head of the largest mob family in America, commanding over 400 soldiers, Costello seamlessly stepped into Luciano's shoes, continuing to expand the family's fortunes by billions of dollars. As the head of the National Fascist Party in Italy adamantly opposed the Sicilian Mafia, Vito Genovese found himself challenged to prove his mettle in both cunning and violence. Genovese astutely aligned himself with Benito Mussolini by generously contributing money and donations towards fascist buildings. His actions didn't stop there. In an audacious move, Genovese orchestrated a hit in New York City on behalf of Mussolini. A persistent critic of Mussolini in a newspaper met a fatal end orchestrated by Genovese's hired killers. In recognition of his financial aid and services, Mussolini honored Genovese with an Italian knighthood. However, despite this recognition, Mussolini's reputation for executing mafiosos kept Genovese on edge, never allowing him to truly relax. When World War II erupted, Genovese, ever the opportunist, capitalized on the chaos. Initially, he exhibited a deceptive duality, cooperating with both the Axis and the Allies. When the American forces invaded Sicily in 1943 and Mussolini fell from power, Genovese swiftly switched sides. He aligned himself with the U.S. military as an interpreter and advisor, apparently aiding them. However, his true motives lay elsewhere. Behind the facade of assistance, Genovese ran a clandestine black marketeering scheme. Exploiting corruptible army officers, he pilfered supplies from army bases and sold them on the black market in Italy. His cunning maneuvers and exploitation of wartime chaos allowed him to amass wealth and influence while appearing as an ally to the U.S. military, all the while profiting from illicit dealings. Vito Genovese, the cunning mobster known for his knack for survival, successfully turns defeat into victory once more. While he thrives in Italy, aligning himself with Benito Mussolini and the National Fascist Party, his ambitions and destiny lie thousands of miles away across the Atlantic. 6 years after fleeing the United States to evade arrest, Genovese establishes himself in Italy, serving the influential leader Benito Mussolini. Seizing an opportune moment during the shift in the tides of war, Genovese strategically switches allegiance to the U.S. Army, offering his services as an advisor. However, despite his success in Italy and his assistance to the Allied forces, Genovese remains a wanted man in New York City. A witness named Peter Latempa implicates him in an unsolved murder back in the U.S., casting a shadow over his newfound life abroad. In August 1944, American authorities finally catch up with Genovese in Naples and extradite him back to New York to face the pending murder charge. However, Genovese, with no intention of taking the blame, finds himself in a peculiar turn of events. In January 1945, while under protective custody, Latempa complains of a gallstone problem. Guarded by officers, he receives painkillers to ease his suffering. Shockingly, within 2 hours of taking the painkillers, Latempa succumbs to an unexplained demise. After the unexpected demise of Peter Latempa, a key witness against Vito Genovese, the case against him crumbles. The toxicologist, examining Latempa's body, reports an astonishingly high dosage of sedatives, enough to incapacitate 8 horses. With Latempa eliminated, there is no substantial evidence left against Genovese. Upon his trial, the judge, acknowledging the lack of corroborating evidence, delivers a scathing assessment. "I cannot speak for the jury, but if there was any shred of corroborating evidence, you would have faced a different fate. By devious means, you have thwarted justice time and time again," the judge pronounces. Despite the accusations, Vito Genovese walks out a free man, escaping conviction once more. However, while Genovese is now a free man, he finds himself not as the boss, but as a subordinate to his old rival, Frank Costello. Costello, a master strategist, presents himself not merely as a gangster, but as a sophisticated businessman. His expansive network includes politicians, congressmen, journalists, authors, judges, and other influential figures, bridging the gap between the legitimate world and the underworld. Genovese, now on the sidelines, witnesses Costello's rise to power and influence in New York. Despite his own prowess, Genovese is intimidated by Costello's intelligence and ability to navigate situations with words rather than relying solely on violence. Costello's sway and connections reach such heights that aspiring political candidates in the Democratic Party seek his endorsement, acknowledging his influence in the city. Jealousy and a sense of intimidation simmer within Genovese as he watches Costello become a pivotal figure in New York's intricate power circles. In the intricate world where the Mafia's grip extends into the political and judicial systems, Frank Costello emerges as a figure of peculiar danger. He may have appeared refined, well-dressed, and cultivated, but behind this facade lay one of the most potent mafiosos in American history. Costello gained the moniker Prime Minister in the media, a designation suggesting his immense influence in the underworld. While there was no official boss of bosses, Costello held a significant position among equals, sometimes a bit more equal than others. Yet Vito Genovese, observing from the shadows, discerns a fatal flaw in Costello's approach. Costello's focus leaned heavily on dealing with the higher echelons, neglecting the foot soldiers of the Mafia, the capos, the captains, and their loyal crews. This negligence, perceived as favoritism towards the upper ranks, led to resentment among the overlooked members. Seizing this discontent as an opportunity, Genovese cleverly undermines Costello's authority. While Costello immersed himself in the upper echelons, Genovese recognized the true pulse of the Mafia lay within the soldiers, the button men, the backbone of the family. To them, Genovese represented authenticity, the genuine criminal figure, while Costello seemed somewhat detached and out of touch with the underworld's core essence. While Costello drifted from the roots, perhaps momentarily forgetting his criminal nature in pursuit of sophistication and influence, Genovese remained steadfastly aware of his true identity, a fact that ultimately became a pivotal weapon in his covert war against Costello. As the dynamics within the criminal underworld continued to unfold, Frank Costello, in his ascent, began to embody his own legend, a larger-than-life image that even his adversaries acknowledged. Genovese, keenly aware of Costello's high standing and the reluctance of other bosses to support a change in leadership, meticulously orchestrated his strategy. Genovese understood that brute force alone wouldn't grant him Costello's coveted position. Instead, he meticulously worked to strengthen his footing, building connections, expanding his financial interests, and ensuring he had a network of soldiers and hitmen at his disposal in case of a showdown. And a critical turning point arrived in 1950 when Estes Kefauver, an ambitious Democratic senator from Tennessee, spearheaded a committee to probe organized crime in the United States. Kefauver's inquiry summoned over 600 individuals, including gangsters, politicians, law enforcement figures, and other underworld personalities, to testify before his committee. The hearings held the nation in thrall, dominating headlines and television broadcasts. Witness after witness, some compelled, some reticent, divulged secrets and insights into the workings of the organized crime syndicates. Reflecting on those tumultuous times, a witness recalls the sensation these investigations caused among the public, shedding light on the well-organized criminal entities operating in the country, a revelation that was both shocking and eye-opening for many. Amidst the hesitation of several witnesses to speak, Frank Costello, in a surprising move, agreed to answer questions. His demeanor and responses to probing inquiries not only captivated the committee, but also echoed across the nation, raising questions about his allegiances and contributions as a citizen. The stark contrast between the guarded silence of others and Costello's willingness to engage with the investigative process only heightened the intrigue surrounding his role in the labyrinthine world of organized crime. Amidst the heated investigations led by Kefauver, Frank Costello, a figure of formidable repute in the underworld, found himself under intense scrutiny. As he faced the committee's probing inquiries, seeking validation for his contributions as an American citizen, Costello's reticent responses only added fuel to the fire. When questioned about his accomplishments as a citizen, Costello, feeling slighted by the interrogation, responded curtly, citing his tax payments as his contribution. He felt his obligations to the country were fulfilled through financial means, underestimating the gravity of the inquiry and the public's expectations. His demeanor shifted from irritation to a sense of humiliation, feeling belittled by the line of questioning. This escalating discomfort reached its pinnacle when Costello, feeling ridiculed, refused to entertain further inquiries, producing a doctor's certificate, claiming an inability to testify truthfully due to a supposed mental fog. This moment marked a turning point in Costello's life, a public disgrace that shattered his once stellar reputation. He left the hearings as the primary target of the Justice Department, his once powerful standing tarnished irreparably by the exposure. Subsequently, Costello faced a barrage of legal troubles. Indictments for tax evasion and lying to Congress followed, leading to his convictions. The man once hailed as the Prime Minister of the underworld found himself stripped of his power and influence, a consequence of his televised appearance before the Kefauver Committee. This televised humiliation proved to be the catalyst that brought the activities of organized crime into the limelight. It heralded the decline of not just Costello's reign, but also cast a shadow on the entire criminal underworld. The attention drawn to the mob's activities following Costello's public debacle would have long-lasting repercussions, eventually culminating in the gradual disintegration of the mob's influence. Costello's downfall paved the way for the inevitable clash between him and Don Vito Genovese. With Costello's reputation in ruins and his power waning rapidly, Genovese, sensing an opportunity, positioned himself for the final showdown to seize control. The stage was set for a battle that would not only determine the fate of these underworld figures, but would also mark the beginning of the end for an era in organized crime. Following Frank Costello's televised ordeal during the Senate investigations, his rival, Vito Genovese, saw a window of opportunity to assert control. Determined to seize power, Genovese commenced a ruthless campaign, initiating a series of targeted assassinations with his sights set on gaining dominance over the most prominent Mafia family in America. Among his primary targets was William "Willie" Moretti, one of Costello's trusted top hitmen. Moretti, a feared New Jersey racketeer with his own sizable force of 60 soldiers, had been a steadfast supporter of Costello. His elimination wasn't merely a strategic move, it carried profound personal undertones. The animosity between Genovese and Moretti had roots in a promotion. When Moretti was promoted to Costello's underboss, second in command only to Costello, Genovese found himself demoted to the captain of his previous crew. This apparent slight fueled Genovese's vendetta against Moretti. Exploiting Moretti's debilitating condition caused by advanced syphilis, which was affecting his cognitive functions, Genovese saw an opportunity. He skillfully manipulated the situation, highlighting Moretti's compromised state to the Mafia Commission, Luciano's brainchild established in 1931 to oversee the mob's affairs democratically. Genovese painted a dire picture, warning that Moretti's illness might lead him to divulge sensitive information to the press. Under the guise of a mercy killing, Genovese sought the Commission's permission to eliminate Moretti, leveraging the strict rules set by the Commission that dictated no boss could be taken out without their authorization. Eventually, the Commission, with its strict protocols and adherence to the rules of engagement within the Mafia, granted Genovese the green light for the hit on Moretti. In the backdrop of an ordinary October morning in 1951, as New Yorkers carried on with their daily routines, the stage was set for a chilling turn of events. The orchestrated assassination of Moretti, orchestrated by Genovese, unfolded, marking a significant moment in the power struggle within the criminal underworld. This meticulously planned elimination wasn't merely about a change in leadership. It symbolized the commencement of a deadly power play that would reverberate throughout the Mafia landscape, signaling the impending clash between contenders vying for dominance. Following Frank Costello's televised vulnerability during the Senate investigations, his rival, Vito Genovese, became increasingly overt in his pursuit to unseat him from power. Yet Costello found himself unable to mount a counter-offensive. He was entangled in a continuous legal battle with the U.S. authorities over charges of contempt of court and tax evasion. Over the subsequent 6 years, Costello was in and out of jail, his freedom swinging on bail. However, when he emerged on bail in March 1957, Genovese was poised to deliver the fatal blow that would cement his ascendancy within the Mafia hierarchy. Despite multiple attempts to gain the Mafia Commission's approval to eliminate Costello, Genovese faced continual denial. But patience wore thin for Genovese, who grew weary of waiting for permission that never arrived. Determined to proceed regardless, he meticulously studied Costello's routines and movements. Genovese astutely observed that the 66-year-old Costello had a habit of taking cabs or walking to various meetings across the city, often without the protection of bodyguards, making him an easy target. Unlike other bosses who surrounded themselves with armies of bodyguards, Costello quipped, "If they're going to kill you, that's the first ones they'll bribe." His minimal security measures left him vulnerable, a fact Genovese aimed to exploit. Genovese entrusted the contract to Vincent Gigante, a former prizefighter turned chauffeur, known for his brute force and ruthless demeanor. Gigante epitomized Genovese's aggression and was disliked for his similarity to Genovese's demeanor. On May 2, 1957, during a dinner outing with friends at an East Side restaurant, Frank Costello's life takes a dramatic turn. As he unwinds among his companions, unaware of the imminent danger lurking nearby, the stage is set for a chilling confrontation that would mark the conclusion of a long-standing power struggle within the criminal underworld. Following a dinner outing, Frank Costello hails a cab to head back to his luxurious apartment at the Majestic Apartments, known for its opulence overlooking Central Park. Despite being aware of Vito Genovese's presence in the vicinity, Costello remained confident in his own safety. On a fateful night, as Costello arrives at the lobby of his apartment building, Vincent Gigante, Genovese's hired hitman, confronts him. In a startling move, Gigante raises his gun, aiming directly at Costello, and shouts, "This is for you, Frank!" A gunshot echoes and chaos ensues. Costello, covered in blood, manages to reach Roosevelt Hospital. The bullet has grazed his skull, and despite the close call, Costello survives the attempt on his life. Authorities launch an investigation into the failed assassination. The doorman at the Majestic identifies Gigante as Costello's assailant. Gigante is subsequently put on trial for attempted murder, creating a complex dilemma for Vito Genovese. Genovese faces a precarious situation, as Costello's testimony could implicate Gigante, who might in turn expose Genovese's involvement. However, adhering to the Mafia code of silence known as omerta, Costello chooses not to identify Gigante during the trial. Gigante emerges acquitted, and as he exits the courtroom, he approaches Costello, extending his hand in gratitude, saying, "Thanks, Frank." This turn of events, while saving Gigante, leaves Genovese anticipating the inevitable repercussions. In anticipation of looming threats, Genovese seeks counsel from Albert Anastasia, a notorious figure known for his ruthlessness and association with Murder, Incorporated. Anastasia's reputation as a fierce and merciless executioner contrasts sharply with Costello's demeanor, despite their friendship. Anastasia's presence as a counterforce indicates that any move against Costello, while Anastasia remains a formidable figure, would have triggered a powerful retaliatory response, amplifying the tension within the criminal underworld. Vito Genovese, realizing the urgency of the situation, sets his sights on Albert Anastasia, the formidable boss, in a bid to strike first. However, Anastasia's fortified New Jersey mansion, guarded by dogs and encircled by barbed wire fences, poses a significant obstacle. Anastasia always moves with a retinue of vigilant bodyguards, making direct confrontation almost impossible. To orchestrate Anastasia's downfall, Genovese turns to an ambitious and rising figure in the crime world, Carlo Gambino, a lieutenant within Anastasia's ranks. Genovese persuades Gambino that their mutual interests would be better served with Anastasia eliminated. On a fateful day, October 25, 1957, Anastasia strolls into a barbershop in Midtown Manhattan. His usual bodyguards park the car in an underground garage and take a brief stroll. Anastasia, known for his meticulous grooming habits, relaxes into the barber's chair, unsuspecting of the impending danger. Suddenly, two men dressed in suits concealing their lower faces with scarves approach Anastasia from behind. In a swift and brutal assault, Anastasia is brutally gunned down, ruthlessly blasted out of the barber's chair. With this act, Genovese effectively removes Costello's primary line of defense. With Costello's defense eliminated, Genovese seizes the moment to consolidate power. He publicly renounces Frank Costello's authority, declaring himself as the new head of the family. Costello, fully aware of the implications, realizes that his reign has reached its end. He faces a stark choice: surrender or risk assassination. Genovese, now in complete control, takes drastic measures. He strips Costello of all his gambling assets and interests across key territories like Las Vegas, Florida, the Caribbean, and New York. Despite this drastic action, Genovese allows Costello to live, but under strict conditions. He must leave the criminal enterprises behind and never engage in racketeering again. This bold move by Genovese not only solidifies his dominance, but also marks the end of an era for Frank Costello, who must grapple with life outside the underworld, stripped of his once vast criminal empire. Following the seismic shift in power, Frank Costello conveys a resounding message to Vito Genovese, acknowledging Genovese's ascent to the throne of the largest mafia family in New York. This endorsement solidifies Genovese's authority and control over the intricate underworld network. With his newfound position at the helm, Vito Genovese becomes the undisputed boss of the largest mafia family in New York. However, his rapid ascent to power blinds him with a ruthless ambition, leading him down a treacherous path. Genovese starts ordering hits on fellow mafia leaders without seeking approval from the established governing body of the mafia, the Commission. This cavalier behavior sets off alarm bells among Commission members, stirring discomfort and disquiet within the once tightly knit criminal organization. Genovese's unchecked actions and unilateral decisions to eliminate other mob leaders without the Commission's consent violate the sacred rules of engagement within the mafia. But that's not the only cause for concern. Genovese's ventures into drug trafficking add fuel to the fire of unease. While some bosses previously dabbled in narcotics, the recent enactment of stringent anti-drug laws by Congress sends shockwaves through the mafia underworld. Genovese's embrace of drug trafficking, which he views as a lucrative opportunity for the mob, rattles many within the mafia's ranks. The narcotics trade, while potentially profitable, carries immense risks, especially with the looming threat of harsh legal consequences. The fear of attracting unwanted attention and legal repercussions becomes a pressing concern for the crime syndicate. The bosses understand the ramifications. Drug dealings bring not just wealth, but also intense scrutiny and increased risk of informants. The threat of lengthy prison sentences and the potential for members to turn into informants, rats, looms large over those involved in drug trafficking. The bosses grapple with the stark reality that dealing in drugs could result in severe legal repercussions and betrayal from within their own ranks. In this climate of apprehension and uncertainty, the mafia bosses grapple with a critical decision: whether to continue venturing into the perilous world of drug trade, knowing the significant risks it poses to their carefully constructed criminal empires. Genovese's bold move into drug trafficking becomes a contentious point, raising concerns about the potential downfall of the once elusive and secretive criminal organization. In the wake of mounting concerns and widespread unease within the mafia ranks, Regarding Vito Genovese's erratic behavior and ventures into drug trafficking, the syndicate's leaders nationwide begin to fear Genovese's renegade approach. They view him as a wild card who disregards the established rules governing their clandestine operations. Realizing the potential peril his actions pose not only to himself but also to the entire organization, Genovese takes a decisive step to salvage his precarious position. He appeals for a meeting of the commission, seeking an opportunity to clarify and rationalize his recent controversial actions in New York. However, Genovese's call for a gathering of the commission becomes an unprecedented move. According to the established traditions, the commission wasn't scheduled to convene for another 4 years, but Genovese's urgency and the gravity of the situation in New York compelled him to press for this exceptional assembly. The meeting site is Apalachin, a tranquil town in upstate New York. This same location previously hosted a national convention, making it an ironically chosen site for this critical assembly. More than 60 senior mafia bosses, accompanied by their advisors and bodyguards, converge at this remote hilltop estate, journeying from different corners of the globe, Cuba, Italy, and various parts of the United States. The chosen location, far removed from the bustling city of New York, offers a sense of seclusion and security from law enforcement surveillance. Apalachin, nestled 180 miles northwest of New York City, provides an ideal setting for the secretive and highly anticipated gathering of the most influential figures in the Mafia. Joseph Barbera, a prominent Mafia boss, hosts this pivotal meeting at his sprawling estate. Among the esteemed guests are towering figures in the Mafia world, including the likes of Joe Bonanno and other powerful figures who wield considerable influence within the criminal syndicate. At the head of this elite assembly sits Don Vito Genovese, signifying his pivotal role in orchestrating this high-stakes meeting. Little did Genovese know that this gathering, convened in an effort to assert control and address mounting concerns, would become a watershed moment, a pivotal event that would change the course of Mafia history. Local Detective Sergeant Edgar Croswell of the New York State Police becomes increasingly suspicious of unusual activity in the normally quiet town of Apalachin. The sudden influx of tourists and a considerable number of cars converging upon a single farmhouse in this remote area doesn't escape the notice of the vigilant local police. Croswell's curiosity is piqued when he observes Joseph Barbera, a figure known for his connections to the mob, making arrangements at the local hotel, significantly booking up rooms. This, combined with a tip-off from a local food supplier regarding Barbera's substantial food orders, 20 pounds of steak, 20 pounds of veal cutlets, and 15 pounds of cold cuts in a single day, adds to the intrigue. Detective Croswell, already keeping a watchful eye on Barbera due to his suspected ties to organized crime, becomes increasingly concerned by the converging circumstances. Realizing the gravity of the situation and the potential risks associated with mob-related activities, Croswell decides to take action and calls for backup. The mounting evidence, such as the unusually high number of visitors, Barbera's accommodation arrangements, and the large food orders, raises red flags in Croswell's mind. With his awareness of Barbera's connections to the Mafia, Croswell understands the need to approach the situation cautiously and with adequate support. Therefore, requesting backup becomes an essential step in preparing for any potential confrontations or criminal activities that might unfold in the days to come. The events at Apalachin marked a pivotal moment in law enforcement's battle against organized crime. Detective Sergeant Edgar Croswell, upon receiving a critical tip, took swift action and rallied the New York State Police to surround the farmhouse where an unprecedented gathering of Mafia members was taking place. As law enforcement closed in, chaos erupted among the gathered mobsters. Panic set in as some attempted to flee, rushing towards their cars while others dashed into the nearby woods, their designer suits torn in their desperate escape. Croswell, leading the operation, directed his troopers to pursue the fleeing mob figures. The police managed to apprehend around 60 members of the Mafia, including prominent leaders from New York like Profaci, Galante, and Gambino. However, some of the attendees managed to evade capture, with estimates suggesting that approximately 50 individuals, including Chicago boss Sam Giancana, successfully escaped the authorities' grasp. The arrested mobsters attempted to justify their presence at the gathering by claiming they were visiting a sick friend, Joseph Barbara, whose farmhouse hosted the meeting. However, law enforcement remained unconvinced by this excuse. The magnitude of the gathering, comprising Italian or Sicilian-American mobsters, couldn't be dismissed as a casual visit. This law enforcement raid at Apalachin, the largest ever carried out on a Mafia gathering, served as a turning point. It not only disrupted the assembly, but also signaled the end of such extensive mob meetings. While Vito Genovese's bid to assert his leadership to the commission failed, the fallout exposed the entire group to the authorities, causing significant damage to their criminal operations and secrecy. The Apalachin meeting of November 14, 1957, proved to be a watershed moment that altered the perception and approach towards organized crime in the United States. Initiated by Vito Genovese, this summit of Mafia families brought together high-ranking members, unwittingly attracting the attention of law enforcement and the FBI. The fallout from the Apalachin summit was seismic. Federal authorities, taking a cue from this gathering, pressed forward with a federal grand jury investigation that resulted in charges against 20 Mafia figures. The allegations included conspiracy to commit perjury and obstruct justice. Despite initial convictions, these rulings were later overturned due to what the United States Court of Appeals deemed insufficient evidence. Nevertheless, this event served as a catalyst, effectively spotlighting organized crime in the public eye and the FBI's focus. J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI director, had previously been reticent to acknowledge the existence of organized crime, often dismissing claims of a national crime syndicate as baseless. However, the magnitude and visibility of the Apalachin meeting forced a shift in this perspective. The significance of this gathering underscored the interconnectedness and scope of organized crime across various states. Until then, the prevailing notion was that crime was primarily a local issue handled by individual law enforcement agencies. However, the Apalachin meeting shattered this notion, exposing the interconnected and organized nature of criminal syndicates operating nationwide. Genovese's attempt to solidify his power ultimately backfired, causing a ripple effect that drew unprecedented attention to the pervasive presence and influence of organized crime. The failed summit inadvertently forced law enforcement, led by the FBI, to acknowledge and confront the reality of a more extensive and coordinated criminal network beyond local jurisdictions. The Apalachin meeting of November 14, 1957, was a pivotal moment that reshaped the way law enforcement and the public perceived organized crime in the United States. It was an audacious display of power and unity within the Mafia, a gathering that mirrored the way legitimate corporations conducted high-level meetings to strategize, plan, and make crucial decisions. This meeting, however, had a ripple effect, altering the landscape of law enforcement's approach to tackling organized crime. Prior to Apalachin, J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI director, had been dismissive of the idea of a national crime syndicate, denying its existence. The boldness and magnitude of the Mafia summit forced a re-evaluation within the FBI. It became glaringly evident that they had a role to play in curbing the widespread influence and operations of organized crime. Consequently, the FBI underwent a transformation in its investigative focus. They began institutionalizing intelligence gathering on organized crime, aiming to understand the structure, activities, and influential figures within these criminal syndicates. The meeting served as a wake-up call, compelling the FBI to acknowledge the existence of a criminal organization known as the Mafia, which had long troubled law-abiding citizens in Sicily, Italy, and the United States. The fallout from the Apalachin meeting led to a more comprehensive approach to intelligence gathering within the FBI. Investigations shifted toward gathering crucial information about the identities of members involved, their activities, and their influence. The raid also prompted the Federal Bureau of Narcotics to target Vito Genovese in their fight against drug trafficking. Despite government accusations linking Genovese to narcotics, he vehemently denied any involvement, dismissing the charges as baseless and ridiculous. However, this intensified the government's efforts to dismantle his alleged role in the narcotics trade. In summary, the Apalachin meeting's aftermath served as a turning point, spurring a fundamental shift in law enforcement's approach toward organized crime. It compelled the FBI to recognize the existence of a national criminal syndicate and prompted more organized and strategic efforts to combat its influence and activities across the country. In April of 1959, Vito Genovese, known as Don Vito across the criminal underworld, faced justice in a Manhattan federal court. He was found guilty of leading an international narcotics syndicate responsible for smuggling heroin and cocaine into the United States. Genovese, a significant figure within the Mafia, was fined $20,000 and sentenced to 15 years in prison. This landmark conviction marked a pivotal moment in the fight against organized crime. However, even with his departure to prison, the impact of Genovese's criminal legacy endured. He played a significant role in introducing the scourge of heroin and narcotics distribution into America. His actions opened up opportunities for the Mafia, enabling widespread drug distribution in major cities like New York and Chicago. The consequences of Genovese's actions extended beyond his personal guilt. His criminal operations had widespread ramifications, marking the onset of a narcotics contagion that engulfed the nation. For the first time, narcotics gained mass appeal, penetrating the inner cities of America and fueling a nationwide crisis. Vito Genovese's criminal empire continued to thrive despite his imprisonment, as he ruled his organization from behind bars until his death in February 1969. Even after his passing, the powerful crime family bearing his name, the Genovese family, persisted in their illicit activities, making millions through their criminal endeavors. However, Genovese's legacy was twofold. While he left behind a thriving criminal enterprise, his actions unwittingly exposed the inner workings of the Mafia to the FBI. His prosecution marked the beginning of the government's crackdown on organized crime in America, initiating a new era of law enforcement targeting these criminal syndicates. Genovese's conviction served as a catalyst for increased scrutiny and action against organized crime groups, heralding a turning point in the fight against their pervasive influence.